introduction, and then we can go from there. We're here with Jamie Elias, the director of for Walter and Josiah, who is she's part of our second week Sun Valley Film Festival at Home series. We're really thrilled to have her. And she was also the recipient of our Luna Woman to Watch Award this year. So we're showcasing another award winner. We're really excited to have you, Jamie. Thank you so much for hopping on and chatting with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks again for involving me. I'm really excited.
So yeah, I'll kick it off and we can just have a general conversation. But I mean, first of all, I just want to repeat that we're such huge fans of the film. We love the documentary, and For Walter and Josiah is really a beautiful, fantastic work. So I just wanted to start out with that, and to kind of ask you, how did you first find out about them and their stories? What really inspired the documentary?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it actually started out on social media. We came across this campaign a school up the road from Two Eagle River, which was the school we did the documentary on, was doing. They were doing kind of a campaign to raise awareness for suicide prevention. And so initially we had reached out kind of to that school, but the more research that we did, we found that though that school was very talented at basketball and everybody was very kind over there, the epicenter was kind of happening in Pablo, where we did the documentary. So through connections, I met the head coach there, and he introduced me to the superintendent, and they both were willing to kind of have us come out and talk about potentially doing a documentary with them.
And how did it take shape in terms of focusing the story on Walter and Josiah specifically, since I'm sure there's a whole community there, and then how did you kind of gain their trust as you were doing this process?
Yeah, so Walter and Josiah were the most recent deaths that had happened on the basketball team, in the basketball circuit. And so initially when we were doing this, I'm pretty involved in sports. Typically, I work for the NFL. Besides this, I played college basketball, and so my niche has always been sports. And we were going to explore this through basketball. And so because of that, Walter and Josiah, it kind of funneled down to those two players. And the superintendent and the coach had introduced me to their mothers, and they were very, I was just very gracious that they were willing to have a conversation with us kind of about the real problem of suicide on the reservation and what had happened with their sons.
And how much time did you spend on the reservation, and what was the process like, again, of getting all this footage and of narrowing it down into a story?
Yeah, so our first trip out, it was me and my DP, and we're just going to go see if anybody is willing to share their story and talk with us. So we were there for 3 days. And I think that the reason why people were willing to speak with us is because in the very beginning, before we even started, we were really transparent and just clear about, hey, we're not here to, this is not a narrative we're trying to impose at all. If anything, we're trying to lift a story of the community and talk about the reasons why things are happening. And so Walter's mother and Josiah's mother were both, they wanted that awareness. And so I think that they were ready to share their story. We were there from, August of 2018 to May or June of 2019. And for those 10 months, we were there for 1 to 2 weeks a month in that duration. Yeah.
And how did you go about structuring everything? I mean, I'm sure the championship kind of offered that to some extent, but how did you kind of go about piecing together the film?
Totally. That was another reason why we liked basketball as this conduit. Because typically, I mean, if you watch the documentary, you'll quickly know that it's not a basketball story. It's not about basketball. But it was a really good kind of, like I was saying, conduit to the story. So it gave us structure with their season. So we kind of started right when the season kicked off, and we ended 3 months after the season had ended and graduation had happened for the boys. Yeah.
And in that sense, also, I mean, I think you really elegantly sort of juggle all these layers and family stories and school championship, and also the historical context of Native American boarding schools and kind of the issues that trickled from that that are affecting today's youth. And so I was wondering, how did you go about balancing all of these and making sure the viewer had the context?
In the very beginning, it was one of those things where I knew that we wanted to have layers to this story because, I mean, again, this is very quickly not just about basketball, right? It's about so many different things in the community. It's about learning specific things in a community very quickly. And so after a couple interviews with some of the elders and tribal members, it was like, it almost presented itself right in the beginning with the layers of a family. And that historical context is extremely important to understand the root of any kind of issue that's happening on a reservation. So I think those layers like metastasized very naturally, which doesn't happen very often. So we got pretty lucky.
And there was a quote I wanted to bring up because that was something that one of the subjects talks about in the film, about how the problem with suicide in the reservation isn't something that you need to sympathize with, but it's something you need to understand, which I thought really beautifully kind of captured what your film's approach feels like. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. How did you kind of go about shaping the tone, and like you were saying, kind of being respectful and sensitive to what was going on, but also kind of raising awareness?
Yeah. So Vernon Finley said that he's an elder. He's actually he's the leader of the Kootenai Culture Committee, and he's a very, very wise man. I think that going into this documentary, nobody that worked on the documentary initially was Native. And so we wanted to be very careful about specifically lifting voices and also getting allies to make sure that we're telling a correct and true interpretation of this story. And Vernon was definitely one of those people for us. I think that just like he said, it's not about, it's nobody's talking about the struggle, right? So this big thing has happened, and a lot of people are like sweeping it under the rug a little bit. And so I think that it's something that, just like he said, you don't need to empathize with it. You just need to understand what actually happened or what is happening and why. And it's not even necessarily about why it's happening, because at the end of the film, there's no clear answer about why it's happening. I think each person is going to have their own opinion on why it's happening. And we found that when we left the reservation, we left with more questions than we did answers. And after Vernon watched the film, that was one thing that he really appreciated, that there was no direct, it's not caught like this happened, so this happened, and this is the way to fix it. That's not what's going on. I think that there's like a lot of different ways to fix it, depending on your own person. So yeah, he's a very wise man.
And kind of on that note, how did you make sure that you were sort of capturing this, like the resilience, I feel like, that you see in the community and in their stories, and not only kind of the mourning process?
Yeah, we leaned very heavily on the community, and like that was a part. This is kind of an interesting documentary in the sense that we didn't have. We did have 4 characters we followed, but the voice of the community, we really tried to lift and narrate the entire story. And so when we were looking for pockets of resilience, it wasn't hard because the members of the community were very like willing to share those with us as well. And you have to see both sides. And I think that there's so much beauty and so many things that are positive on the reservation, as well as things that are dark and that are hard to talk about. But the community is definitely doing everything they can to shift the pendulum. So it was easy to find some resilience.
And you have a really like a really beautiful visual style, I thought, in the film, and in kind of how you incorporated the landscapes into the story. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your choices in like your visual approach.
Thank you. I think that a huge shout out goes to Addison Neville, who's our DP. He's got just a beautiful eye. He can see things that it's just, you see it when it plays back, and I'm like, how did you capture that? Initially, when we started this, when we were talking to elders in the community, animals play a huge role on the reservation. And so as much as we could, we were looking for moments in nature. Montana itself is like a character in the reservation. It's so vast and beautiful, and the weather changes so quickly, and it's moody, and it's all of these things. And so before the film started, we had a real big conversation about how we wanted to capture Montana as a character, animals in Montana as a character, and kind of those verite moments that we might not have seen if we didn't have the conversation kind of prior to shooting.
And you mentioned this earlier, but you do come from kind of a heavy sports background, professionally, and having played before as well. I was wondering how this shaped the storytelling. As you said, it's not your typical sports documentary. It's not about basketball, but about so much more. So how, again, did you kind of go about balancing the mental health elements that were intersecting with sports, and how did the sports background sort of inform your storytelling?
Yeah. I can't compare like anything that I've gone through to anything that these boys have gone through at all. But what I do know for certain is that sports can definitely be an outlet to get your mind off of stuff that's happening in your everyday life. Again, small potatoes, but I've seen it work in my colleagues' life. I've seen it work in my teammates' lives, and it's very, very apparent and clear how it worked in these boys' lives. So I think that maybe being on the other side of that and being able to play and know that it is absolutely an outlet, even on like the small level that it was for me, I couldn't imagine how important that it was to some of those kids. So that was kind of, as much as it wasn't a basketball story, it absolutely was a sports story.
And have the boys seen the film?
Yeah, so this is actually so sad. Right before COVID, we were going out to do a screening, and then everything hit. I know. So we have showed it. Our EP is Dana Hewitt-Corn, and she's a community outreach leader on the reservation, and we showed it to Vernon Finley, who is also an elder in the community, and they both responded very positively to it. So that was great, but we definitely, we were setting up screenings for the boys. We want to kind of make sure that we're handling that in the correct way, but of course we're going to show them. It was right when this hit.
No, I know. And I'm sure you want them to have the full screen experience and be there with the community to experience it too. So
Totally. I know, it was such a bummer. It was like my contract was ending with the NFL, so I had all this free time. I'm like, I'm going to go out, we're going to show them. And then a week later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad that at least we're getting more folks to see it and to raise awareness of it. I wanted to ask, because in the ending you go over what happened to some of the boys, but I was wondering also what happened or how their mothers are doing, or what's kind of the latest
Yeah, with Sheree and Dolly.
with Sheree and Dolly, yeah.
So I have spoken very briefly with Sheree. She was another person, and Sheree and Dolly both we were going to show when we went back to the reservation. I've really tried to, I feel like we were so intrusive in their life. That's probably the wrong word, but I feel like we were so present in their lives for a long time that I really tried to give them space. Mm-hmm. I know that Dolly is dealing with cancer right now. And so that's just another layer in her life that's very frustrating, and you hate to see terrible things happen to good people over and over again. Yeah. And Sheree, we were just in contact with about coming out and showing her the film. She seems like like she said at the end of the film, it's still dark on the reservation, but it seems like she's surviving. So
yeah, I mean, I like that was part of that ending too, in the sense that I felt like there was a sense of there was like a note that was maybe uplifting is the wrong word, but there's a sense of a future that's open to all of them.
Like the pendulum is swinging upwards. That's kind of what the whole community is striving for, continues to strive for. So.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's actually a really great note to kind of end on. Is there anything else that you want to go over, or?
Oh no, that was great. No, that was perfect. I mean, our whole crew was amazing. I wish that we could all be together and be doing this typically, but